Karen's little son had no idea one tiny laugh could flip an entire courtroom upside down. He chuckled, careless and bold, while his mother smirked like she owned the place. But the second Judge Judy lifted her eyes, the air changed. The cameras stopped. The audience froze. Even the boy's smile slipped off his face as if something cold had grabbed it. Because Judy wasn't angry, she was patient. And when Judge Judy goes quiet, someone's world is about to break. But before we dive in, tell me, where are you watching from? Don't forget the subscribe button. The laugh still hung in the air, thin, sharp, and careless, as if it had been carved into the walls themselves. It did not belong in a courtroom, yet it lingered there, vibrating against every uneasy breath in the room. Even the cameras seemed to pause, adjusting their gaze toward the small boy who had dared to let it slip. He sat beside his mother, swinging his feet, unaware that the air around him had shifted into something colder. Karen nudged him proudly, her smirk bright enough to cut through the silence. She leaned back in her chair, fingers laced behind her head as though she were watching a comedy special rather than standing trial. Her confidence moved through the room like static, arrogant, self-satisfied, completely unaware of the storm she had just summoned. Judge Judy did not speak. She did not scold. She did not even blink. Instead, she allowed the quiet to stretch, long and thin, until even Karen's smile twitched out of rhythm. Judy's gaze remained anchored to the file on her desk, her hand resting lightly on the corner. It was the kind of stillness that meant something was building beneath the surface, the kind that made observers sit up straighter without understanding why. The camera eased into a slow zoom, closing on Judy's face just as she lifted her eyes. The warmth had drained from the room. What replaced it was the unmistakable weight of discipline, not loud, not angry, simply inevitable. Karen scoffed at the shift. "Oh, come on," she muttered, loud enough for the audience to hear. "He's a kid." But the boy's smirk wavered. Not much, just enough to be seen by anyone who knew how to watch children closely. His laughter had been free a moment earlier, but something in Judy's gaze had reached him, snatching the humor out of the air and replacing it with a heavy question he did not yet understand. Judy leaned back in her chair, fingers lightly tapping the file's edge. The sound was quiet, but it echoed like a countdown. The courtroom held its breath. "Stand up," she said. Her voice did not rise. It did not need to. It carried a gravity that made the boy's legs stiffen before he even realized he was obeying. Karen laughed again, softer this time, a forced exhale meant to reclaim control. But her son didn't laugh with her. His small hands tightened around the arms of the chair. Wide shot, the entire courtroom watching him rise, a ripple of shifting bodies, uncertain eyes, and a silence too heavy for someone his size to bear. Judy's gaze didn't move from the boy's face. "Stand up," she repeated, gentle, firm, unshakable. And as he pushed himself to his feet, the room felt smaller. Because no one, not even his mother, expected what Judy would ask him next. Judy tilted her head just slightly and said, "Let me see your eyes, young man." The boy raised them, trembling, and that was when the real story began. The boy's eyes barely met Judge Judy's before flickering away, the confidence he'd worn like a mask slipping just a little. The courtroom felt tighter now, as though every breath depended on what he might say next. Karen noticed the hesitation and immediately swooped in with her voice, sharp, bright, and dismissive. "He doesn't need to be stared down," she said. "He's a child. You're intimidating him." But Judy did not look at her. She kept her focus on the boy, calm and steady, the way a lighthouse holds its beam even while waves crash against it. Her silence was not intimidation, it was invitation, and the boy felt that difference deeply, even if he could not name it. When he didn't answer right away, Karen leaned forward, placing a hand on his shoulder. "Sweetie, tell her what happened," she urged. Her tone carried the false warmth of someone performing for an audience. Her fingers tightened just slightly, pressure disguised as comfort. The boy swallowed. Before he could speak, the courtroom door creaked open. The victim stepped in slowly, holding a small cardboard box against his chest, the way someone might cradle something fragile. His presence softened the room, though his eyes looked tired, tired of being mocked, tired of being ignored. He approached the bench, offering a respectful nod. "Your Honor," he said quietly, "I brought the phone and something else." Karen rolled her eyes so dramatically the entire front row reacted. Seriously? We're doing props now? The victim did not respond. He opened the box carefully, revealing the shattered phone, its screen split like a spiderweb of truth waiting to unravel. The boy's eyes widened at the sight, recognition, guilt, something deeper flickering through him. Judy motioned for the clerk to bring the evidence forward. The courtroom leaned in as though gravity itself had shifted toward the bench. "This is what he broke," Karen said quickly. "But it was an accident. Kids drop things. Maybe the man should not have handed a phone to a child." The victim shook his head. "I didn't hand it to him," he said softly. "He grabbed it. He was filming himself dancing on the counter." The audience murmured. Karen let out a short, sharp laugh. "Oh, please, he's creative. Is that a crime now?" Judy finally looked at her, once sharply, enough to slice through her theatrics. Karen's mouth closed. Judy turned back to the victim. "You mentioned you brought something else." He nodded and reached into the box again. What emerged was a small USB drive, silver and unassuming, but the room reacted as though he had placed a lit match on the table. Karen's posture stiffened. The boy's breath caught. "This," the victim said quietly, "is the security footage from my shop. I believe the court should see what really happened." The lighting seemed to dim, tension folding around the moment like a shadow preparing to fall. Judy took the drive between her fingers, held it to the light, and said, "Then let us watch the truth for ourselves." And the courtroom exhaled, because everyone knew the truth was never kind when it finally arrived. The lights dimmed just slightly as the clerk plugged the silver USB drive into the courtroom monitor, the screen flickering to life with a cold blue glow. A hush rolled across the room, slow, deliberate, like a tide that pulled everyone into stillness. Even Karen sat forward, though her smirk remained brittle at the edges. The video began without sound, a wide camera angle, a small shop with neatly arranged shelves, and there, the boy, climbing onto the counter while holding the victim's phone as if it were a toy he had every right to play with. Karen gave a forced laugh. "Kids climb things," she muttered. "He's energetic. That's normal." But the energy in the room had changed. It did not feel normal. It felt inevitable. The footage zoomed slightly as the boy began to dance on the countertop, hopping from one foot to the other, phone waving dangerously above the glass display. The victim, visible in the corner, rushed forward with open hands, fear etched in his body language. Then came the moment no one expected. Karen stepped into the frame. She wasn't stopping her son. She was filming him. The audience inhaled sharply. Karen, in real time, folded her arms and nodded proudly at the screen. "Yes, I took a video. It was cute. People record their kids all the time. But on the footage, it wasn't cute. It wasn't innocent. It was chaos." The victim approached carefully, palms out. The boy jerked away playfully, losing his balance for one split second. The phone slipped, slowly, weightlessly, before smacking the counter edge and crashing to the floor. On screen, Karen laughed loudly, filming every second. The boy laughed too, the same laugh that had echoed through Judge Judy's courtroom earlier. Then came the moment Judy froze. She leaned forward, her hands suspended above the control buttons. The camera had captured Karen stepping toward her son, bending close to whisper something in his ear. "Watch closely," Judy said. She rewound, played it again, paused on the exact frame. In the frozen stillness, Karen's lips were inches from the boy's ear. Her expression was sharp, not maternal, not amused, but calculating. Karen shifted in her chair, her smirk thinning. "You can't even see what I'm saying there?" But the boy's reaction on the footage told another story altogether. His smile faded, his feet stilled, and he glanced at the victim with sudden seriousness. The courtroom felt colder, as if the truth itself had lowered the temperature. "What did you say to him?" Judy asked quietly. Karen opened her mouth, but the boy beat her to it. On the screen, the audio kicked in, distorted but clear enough. "Just say it was an accident," Karen's voice whispered. Gasps tore through the room. The boy on screen nodded obediently. And in real time, the boy sitting in the courtroom looked down at his shoes, shame settling on him like dust. Judy paused the video on Karen's whisper, her instruction to lie, and said, "It seems the accident wasn't the only thing staged." The room held its breath, because everyone knew the real unraveling was about to begin. The screen froze mid-frame, capturing Karen's whisper like a secret suspended in glass. The stillness felt eerie, almost surgical, as if the courtroom itself were dissecting the truth. The camera caught her leaning in toward her son, her lips curled in determination, eyes locked on the victim like he was nothing more than an obstacle in her way. But the boy's face on the footage told another story, a face trying to understand whether obedience was safety or a trap. "Play it again," Judy said. Her voice was low, level, and quiet enough to make everyone straighten in their seats. Quiet was always the beginning of something. The clerk replayed the moment, Karen whispering, the boy's smile collapsing, his hushed, obedient nod. Karen let out a short scoff. "This is ridiculous. You're making a huge deal out of nothing. Parents tell their kids what to do all the time." Judy's eyes lifted, not fast, not slow, but with the kind of precision that felt like a blade turning. "Do you tell yours to lie?" she asked. Karen blinked. "Excuse me." The room seemed to lean in. Even the lights hummed louder. Judy didn't repeat herself. She didn't need to. Her silence was more demanding than a raised voice could ever be. Karen laughed, too loud, too quick, a sound meant to cover the tremor in her confidence. "You're twisting things. He didn't even hear me properly." But the boy sitting at her side heard that clearly. His small shoulders curled inward, as though trying to disappear beneath his own breath. Judy shifted her focus to him, her expression softening just enough to be seen. "Look at me," she said gently. He lifted his eyes, hesitant but drawn to the steadiness in her tone. "What do you remember about that moment?" Karen tensed. Her hand moved toward him again, but Judy held up a single finger, a quiet command that stopped her mid-reach. The boy swallowed hard. His voice wavered like something fragile learning how to stand. I remember," she said. He stopped. Glancing at his mother, Karen stared at him, her jaw locked in place, her smile frozen in a warning she hoped Judy wouldn't notice. The subtle crack in her mask deepened. "It's all right," Judy murmured. "Tell the truth. No one will hurt you for it." The boy's breathing hitched. He looked at his shoes, then at the victim, then finally up at Judy, the only face in the room that wasn't demanding anything from him. "My mom told me," his voice thinned to a whisper, "told me to say it was an accident." Karen's eyes widened, but he wasn't finished. He took one more trembling breath. "And she said," his voice broke, "she said you can't do anything to us." The audience gasped. Karen froze. Judy did not move, but the air around her did, tightening like a drawn bowstring. Judy leaned forward, her gaze sharp enough to still the room, and said, "Is that so?" The boy nodded, and the entire courtroom felt the floor shift beneath them, because consequences were finally coming. The moment the boy finished speaking, the silence snapped, not loudly, but sharply, like a thin sheet of ice cracking under weight. Karen jerked toward him so fast her chair screeched across the floor. Her fingers hovered just above his arm, trembling with a mix of panic and control. "Sweetheart, you misunderstood," she said, voice sugar-sweet but shaking around the edges. "You know how nervous you get. You must have heard me wrong." But Judy lifted one finger, the same gesture that had frozen the courtroom before, and everything stopped moving. "Do not interrupt him," she said quietly. Quiet always meant danger. Karen's hand dropped back into her lap, but the smile she forced onto her face was brittle enough to splinter. The boy didn't look at her. He didn't look at anyone. His shoulders were small, sinking into the tension like he was bracing himself for something he'd known his whole life. Judy nodded gently toward him. "Thank you for telling the truth." The boy blinked, startled, as if no one had ever thanked him for honesty before. Karen let out a laugh that didn't match any emotion in her body. "Oh, come on. He's confused. Kids say things. You can't possibly take that seriously." But Judy was already opening the original complaint file, her fingers steady, deliberate. She flipped to the second page, the one Karen had signed herself. A copy of her handwriting stared back at her in black ink, bold, exaggerated confidence. "Ms. Karen," Judy said, eyes scanning the document, "you wrote here that your son panicked because the man startled him." She tapped the line once. "Except the video shows him dancing on the counter and laughing." Karen's throat tightened visibly. Well, that's not what I meant. She waved her hands wildly, trying to find a story she hadn't prepared in advance. You're twisting everything. The only thing twisted here, Judy cut in, is your relationship with the truth, the audience murmured, the weight of consequences gathering like storm clouds. Karen's eyes flared. You do not get to judge me as a mother. That's exactly what I am doing, Judy replied, because you forced your son into the position of shielding your behavior. A flush rose to Karen's cheeks, anger, humiliation, fear, all tightening behind her eyes. She looked at her son, who was now sitting rigid, staring at the table in front of him like it was safer than looking up. Look at me, she hissed under her breath, but he didn't. For the first time, he didn't. Judy closed the file slowly, the soft thud sounding heavier than any gavel strike. Let us move forward, she said, because there is something in your own paperwork that you may want to explain. Karen froze. Everyone felt it, the pivot, the tightening coil of truth about to unwind. Judy lifted the file again, her finger landing on a specific sentence Karen had hoped no one would ever read aloud. And when she spoke, Karen's mask cracked completely. The file's edge was still warm from Judy's hand when she lifted it again, the thin pages catching the courtroom light like a blade. Karen straightened abruptly, her smile vanishing as if someone had pulled a string inside her. The boy watched his mother with wide, uneasy eyes that finally understood something was wrong, long before anyone said it aloud. What I am about to read, Judy began, comes from your own written statement. Karen swallowed hard, her nails digging into her palms. The courtroom leaned in. Judy held the paper at eye level. You wrote here, she tapped the line slowly, that the victim harassed your child and that you felt he deserved the damage done to his property because he should have known better than to question a child. A ripple of disbelief rolled through the room. Karen's voice cracked the silence. That's not what I meant. I was upset when I wrote it. Judy didn't look up. You also wrote, she continued, that your son was expressing himself and that the store owner humiliated him by speaking sternly. The boy's face tightened, confusion and embarrassment battling behind his eyes. Judy closed the file halfway. Is that still your position, Miss Karen? Karen's jaw clenched. Her voice rose too fast, too loud. Yes, because he made a scene. He embarrassed my son. He made him cry. The victim looked down at his hands, fingers twisting together. Ma'am, he said softly, he only cried after he broke the phone and you yelled at me in front of him. Karen shot him a glare, sharp enough to cut. You scared him, she insisted. You're a grown man. Why are you even talking to a child when I'm right there? But no one in the courtroom seemed to buy her indignation anymore. Not after the footage, not after the whispered lie, not after her son's trembling confession. Judy leaned back slightly, studying her with a cool, searching gaze. I see a pattern, she said. Disrespect for others, disrespect for accountability, and now disrespect for the truth itself. Karen opened her mouth, but Judy lifted a single hand, and the words died on Karen's lips. Then Judy turned to the boy, her tone shifting to something softer, steadier. I want to ask you something, she said, and I want you to answer only if you feel safe to do so. Karen stiffened. He is safe. He's with his mother. But the boy didn't nod. He didn't lean toward her. Instead, he shifted slightly away, a movement so small and subtle that only someone paying close attention, someone like Judy, would notice. What does the word respect mean to you? Judy asked gently. The boy's lips parted, but no sound came out. His small hands twisted around each other, shoulders curling inward as if he were trying to fold himself away from the moment. Karen stared at him, horrified. Answer her! He flinched, and Judy's eyes snapped toward Karen with a sharpness that froze the air. Do not speak for him again, Judy said. Let him decide for himself what respect means. The boy lifted his head, for the first time choosing silence that belonged to him. If you were sitting in that courtroom, would you speak up or stay silent and let the truth reveal itself? The boy's lifted head trembled slightly, as if even the act of looking forward instead of down required new muscles he had never used before. The courtroom held its breath, waiting not for Karen's voice, which had dominated everything until now, but for the small, uncertain voice of a child finally being asked what he felt instead of what he was told to say. Judy's gaze stayed soft, steady, giving him room to speak without fear. That silence, patient and warm, became the safest place in the room. "Take your time," she said. Karen scoffed, crossing her arms. "This is absurd. Judy didn't look at her. "Do not interrupt again." Karen's mouth snapped shut. The air tightened around her. The boy breathed in slowly, his chest rising like someone trying to swim upward through deep, heavy water. His voice, when it finally emerged, was barely audible. "I thought it was funny," he whispered, "because Mom was laughing." He winced as though the memory stung. His feet shuffled against the floor, his sneakers squeaking softly, tiny sounds that echoed like confessions in the quiet. Karen's head whipped toward him. "Honey, stop! You did nothing wrong. I told you—" "Ms. Karen," Judy said sharply. "Enough." Karen froze again, her power thinning with each passing second. The boy stared at his hands. "When she laughs, I'm supposed to laugh too." His fingers tightened. "Even if something isn't funny." The words landed heavier than any accusation. They weren't rehearsed, they weren't coached. They were real, painfully, achingly real. A subtle shift rippled through the courtroom, a shared understanding settling like dust. This wasn't about a phone anymore. It was about a boy learning the difference between approval and pressure. Karen's face contorted, something between anger and panic tightening her eyes. "You're making it sound like I force you." He interrupted her with a small broken sound. Not a word, but a breath that meant, "Please stop talking for me." Judy leaned in, studying the boy with the quiet attention of someone who saw past behavior and into the heart beneath it. "What do you want to say?" she asked. His shoulders rose once more, a trembling inhale, before he finally allowed his truth to surface. "I don't want to get people in trouble," he said softly. "But Mom said—" His voice thinned again. "She said if I don't do what she tells me, people will think we're bad." Karen's composure cracked wide open. "That is not true," she snapped, desperation flooding her voice. "You don't understand what people are like. I was protecting you." But it didn't sound like protection. It sounded like fear wearing the costume of authority, a mask Judy had seen countless times. The boy pulled his hands into his sleeves, shrinking from his mother's rising voice. And for the first time, Karen seemed to realize she couldn't reach him, not with words, not with pressure, not with performance. He was no longer facing her, he was facing himself. Judy exhaled, slow, deliberate, and opened a new document on her bench. "Then," Judy said, her voice turning cool and precise, "it is time we talk about what your mother did next." The room tightened again, because everyone sensed that the worst truth was still waiting. The gavel had not moved, yet the room felt struck by something heavy and invisible. Judy slid a fresh document across her bench, her eyes tracking Karen with the kind of quiet precision that made panic bloom before a single word was spoken. The boy kept his gaze lowered, but the subtle tremor in his shoulders revealed the depth of everything he carried, guilt that was never his, fear that had never belonged in childhood. "Ms. Karen," Judy began, "this is a secondary report filed a week after the incident." Karen stiffened. Her reaction was too quick, too telling. Judy lifted the document and read the heading aloud. "Statement from the store owner who witnessed your behavior before and after the damage." Murmurs flickered at the edges of the audience. Karen forced a laugh. "That man will say anything to make me look bad. He hated me from the moment I walked in." Judy raised a brow, unimpressed. "According to this report, you berated him for embarrassing your child and called him—" She paused, scanning the line. "A pathetic nobody who should mind his own business." The boy's head jerked up, eyes widening with shock. "Mom, you said that?" Karen waved the air as though batting away an annoying fly. "It was heat of the moment. He made you upset, remember?" But the boy didn't remember that. He remembered laughing. He remembered being told to lie. He remembered her version of events reshaping his own. Judy continued calmly. "The report also states that you encouraged your son to mock the victim publicly before leaving the store." The audience gasped softly. Even the bailiff shifted his stance. Karen snapped, "Kids tease. It is harmless. He needs confidence. I am teaching him not to let people push him around." Confidence, Judy replied, is not built by tearing others down. For the first time, Karen did not respond. The silence stretched, thick and telling. Then Judy reached for another document, a thin, crisp sheet clipped behind the first. There is more. The store's camera recorded your interaction. You saw the first angle today. Karen's eyes darted to the monitor, panic creeping in. Judy tapped the corner of the page. But what you may not know is that the store had a second camera, one positioned behind the counter. The courtroom froze. Even Karen, who had wielded arrogance like armor all morning, went still. Her shoulders tightened, her breath held hostage. A second camera? She repeated, voice cracking. No, that is not. There was only one, the boy whispered, almost to himself. Behind the counter? Judy nodded once, her expression unchanging, as if truth were a slow tide rising at her command. That angle, she said, sliding the paper forward, provides a much clearer view of the moment the phone fell. Karen shook her head violently. No, that footage is wrong. It must be wrong. But Judy lifted her hand, silencing her panic. Bring the second video up, Judy instructed. I think it is time we all see what truly happened. The monitor flickered, the room inhaled, and Karen's world began to collapse in real time. The second video didn't ease onto the screen. It hit it, a sudden flash, a hard cut, like truth was done asking for permission. The new angle came from behind the counter, sharper, closer, uncomfortably intimate. The boy's sneakers appeared first, tapping against the glass display. Then Karen entered the frame, not laughing, not playful. Her face was tight, annoyed, her eyes locked on the victim like he had personally offended her existence. Karen's breath caught in the real courtroom. Her son flinched at the sound. On screen, the victim stepped forward, hands up in a gesture of peace. Hey, buddy, he said softly, let me help you down so you do not fall. The boy looked at him, still smiling, until Karen leaned in. Her voice, clear now, captured by the better microphone, slid through the speakers. Don't get off, she hissed. Make him come to you. He has to learn. A wave of cold washed through the room. The boy on screen obeyed. The boy in court shrank. Then the shove, not from the man, not from clumsiness, but from Karen's own hand nudging her son just enough to send him stumbling. The phone flew from his grasp, arcing downward in a slow, terrible curve before shattering on the tile. Karen's laughter rang out, not playful, triumphant. The real Karen surged to her feet. This is taken out of context. You do not know what happened before that. He was being rude. Sit, Judy commanded. The word was soft, but it carried the weight of a falling verdict. Karen dropped into her seat as if pushed. The boy stared at the screen, horror widening his eyes. He touched his chest, like he was checking whether the laughter in the video still lived somewhere inside him. Judy folded her hands. Ms. Karen, do you understand what this shows? Karen's lips trembled. That camera angle is lying. People edit things. YouTube. It is raw footage, Judy said, time-stamped, filed the same day, unaltered. Karen shook her head, eyes darting wildly as if searching for someone, anyone, willing to believe her performance now. But the audience had gone still. Even the bailiff's posture had changed, shoulders squared, gaze unblinking. Your Honor, the victim said softly, I never wanted this to hurt her son. I just wanted her to take responsibility. The boy blinked hard, a small sound escaping him, not a sob, not yet, just a crack in the wall he'd been building for years. Karen reached for him again. Honey, it's okay. He recoiled so sharply her hand froze midair. That was it. The moment no one could unsee. The moment her power slipped from her fingers completely. Judy leaned forward, voice quiet, heavy, unarguable. This is no longer about a broken phone, she said. It is about a pattern of behavior. And we are not finished. Karen's shoulders shook. The boy stared at the judge like she was the first adult telling him the truth. Judy tapped the bench once, a soft, ominous signal, and said, There is something else we need to discuss. The room reeled into silence. If you were that child's friend, would you tell him the truth or protect him from it? The second video faded out, but its echo stayed. A weight, a bruise, a truth that refused to leave the room. The boy stood in it like a small figure in the path of a storm, his breath shallow, his eyes fixed on the floor as if it might open and swallow him whole. "Look at me, please," Judy said. Her voice was calm, almost gentle, but it carried the unmistakable pull of gravity. Slowly, painfully, the boy lifted his head. Karen moved first. She leaned toward him with frantic urgency, grabbing at his sleeve. "You don't have to say anything else. Do you hear me? You don't—" Judy raised her hand, 1 inch of movement. One gesture that shut down every word in Karen's throat. "Ms. Karen," Judy said, "I meant what I said. You will not speak for him." The boy's sleeve slipped from his mother's grasp. The camera cut to his face, small, pale, and caught between fear and relief. His eyes flicked to Judy, then to the victim, then back to his mother. And for the first time, he didn't seem to know which world he belonged to. Judy folded her hands. "You said your mother told you to say it was an accident. I need you to tell me something now. Not what she said, not what you think she wants, but what you believe." The boy's lips trembled. A tiny breath escaped him, uneven, frightened, brave. Karen's chair scraped loudly as she stood. "This is manipulation. He's a child. He does not understand what you are asking." "Sit," Judy said, without raising her voice. And Karen sat. The boy looked at her, not for guidance this time, but for something he had never seen on her face and could not find now. His fingers knotted together, knuckles whitening, tiny hands trying to hold onto a world that had stopped making sense. He whispered. "I thought I had to say it, because if I didn't, she'd get mad at me." A hush fell so deep it felt like the walls themselves leaned closer to hear him. Karen shook her head, but her voice failed before it reached air. The victim swallowed, his eyes softening. "Son, you didn't deserve to be in that position." The boy blinked again, slower this time, like each tear was asking permission before falling. Judy leaned forward, her tone shifting to something warmer. "You are not in trouble," she said. "You are safe here. And you did something very brave today." A small part of him seemed to thaw at her words. His shoulders lifted, then fell, as if releasing years of invisible weight. Karen watched him, not with pride now, but with something closer to fear. The kind that comes when you realize the story you built is starting to crumble in your own hands. Judy glanced down at her notes. "There is one more matter," she said slowly, her voice turning cool again. "Something that happened after the incident. Something you did not disclose." Karen froze. The boy looked terrified all over again. Judy tapped a thin report on her desk. "This," she said, "is from your son's school counselor, and we are going to read it next." The room went silent, the kind of silence that never arrives alone. The report sat on the bench like a sealed door, quiet, thin, and terrifying in its understatement. Judy rested her fingertips on it, not opening it yet, letting the tension thrum through the room like a low electric hum. The boy stared at the paper as if it were something alive, something that knew more about him than he'd ever dared say aloud. The mini-hook struck instantly. Judy slid the report forward just an inch. Karen flinched as if it were a weapon. "Ms. Karen," Judy said, her tone crisp enough to cut, "this report was written by your son's school counselor 2 months before the incident." Karen forced a smile, a brittle, exhausted thing. "Kids talk, counselors exaggerate, it's all—" "Stop!" Judy didn't raise her voice, but the word landed like a dropped gavel. The boy's breath hitched. Judy opened the report. Her eyes moved slowly, reading in silence. The courtroom leaned in, shadows stretching across the floor as if the lighting itself were waiting for her verdict. When she finally spoke, her voice was quieter than before, but heavier. "It says here," Judy began, "that your son confided he often feels pressured to tell stories that make Mom look good." Karen's mouth fell open. "That is not true. They twisted," Judy continued reading, unbothered. "He says he feels scared when she gets angry because she says people are out to judge them." The boy's shoulders caved inward, his fingers digging into the wooden armrest as if trying to anchor himself to anything solid. Karen snapped, "He does not even remember saying that. But then, something no one expected happened." The boy lifted his head. His voice trembled, but this time, it didn't break. "I said that," he whispered. Karen's eyes widened, stunned. "No, sweetheart, you didn't—" "Yes," he said, louder this time, a thin but brave thread of sound. "I remember. I told Miss Howard, because you said people were against us, and if I didn't help you, we'd be in trouble." Karen blinked rapidly, like reality was slipping through her fingers. I was trying to teach you to be strong, she insisted, not to let people walk over you. But the boy's expression shifted. Hurt, confusion, and a dawning understanding that cut deeper than the arguments swirling around him. The victim spoke softly from the stand. Son, being strong doesn't mean lying to protect someone who scares you. Karen whipped toward him, fury rising. He is my child, not yours. The boy flinched at the volume, and Judy's hand lifted instantly. Enough! Silence fell again, thick, grave, immovable. Judy looked directly at the boy. Did you ever feel afraid to tell the truth at home? Karen's eyes widened, horror flashing like lightning. The boy hesitated, one long, fragile second, then nodded. Karen gasped, breath shattering, and Judy closed the report with a soft, chilling snap. Then we must address, she said, voice low and final, why a child feels fear in his own home. The boy froze. Karen stared at the floor, and the room braced for the truth that was about to break everything open. The moment the counselor's report snapped shut, something in the room, and in Karen, broke. A thin, strangled sound slipped from her throat, not loud, not dramatic, not the theatrical outrage she'd worn like armor all morning. This sound was small, real, human. For the first time, Karen looked less like a storm and more like someone drowning in the one she created. The boy stared at his shoes again, but this time it wasn't shame that pulled his shoulders inward. It was exhaustion, the kind that settles into a child who's been carrying an adult's burdens far too long. Judy let the silence sit, not as punishment, but as truth. A reckoning sometimes needs quiet to land. Ms. Karen, she began, voice stripped of all theatrics, your son should never be afraid of you, not in your home, not in public, not ever. Karen blinked rapidly, her chest heaving. I was just trying to protect him, she insisted, but her voice wavered, thin as tissue. I'm his mother. Everything I do for him. The boy looked up, and the innocence in his eyes had been replaced with something older, something that should not live behind the eyes of someone so young. That's not protecting, he whispered. Karen turned to him, stunned. Baby! But he wasn't looking at her now. He was looking at Judy, as if seeking permission to keep going, and Judy nodded. Tell me, she said gently. What happened after the phone broke? The boy's small fingers curled in on themselves. She yelled at him. He nodded toward the victim. She said it was his fault. But I knew it wasn't. I wanted to say it, but she grabbed my arm and her nails. He winced, rubbing a barely healed scratch on his wrist. Karen's face crumpled. Tears threatened, but they didn't soften her expression. They sharpened it, carving panic into her features. I didn't mean to hurt you, she whispered to him. You know that. You know I just wanted you to listen. The boy didn't respond. He didn't nod. He didn't shake his head. He just looked away. And that tiny, devastating turning of his face hit Karen harder than any ruling ever could. Judy leaned forward. Ms. Karen, this court is not here to judge your love for your son, but we are here to judge your actions, and they have consequences, not just for you, but for him. Karen's tears finally spilled. She covered her face with her hands, her shoulders quaking. The audience watched, not with glee, but with a quiet, aching stillness. This was not entertainment anymore. It was a reckoning. The boy wiped his eyes with the sleeve his mother's grip had wrinkled. Am I in trouble? He whispered, barely audible. Judy's answer was immediate, firm, and gentle. No. You did the bravest thing a child can do. You told the truth. The boy let out a tiny, shaking breath, the first hint of relief. But Judy wasn't finished. She turned her attention back to the mother, her expression returning to steel. Ms. Karen, she said, there is one more matter to address before I issue my ruling. Karen's hands dropped from her face. Her eyes widened, terrified, pleading, knowing. Judy tapped the final page on her desk. This concerns what you said to your son after you left that store. The room froze again. The final page lay beneath Judy's fingertips like a verdict waiting to be spoken. Karen's breathing was loud now, ragged, the sound of someone frantically trying to climb out of a hole they kept digging themselves deeper into. The boy sat perfectly still, small hands folded in his lap, knuckles white. Judy slid the last document forward. Karen flinched before she even saw it. "This," Judy said, her voice even and controlled, "is the statement from your son's school counselor, Ms. Howard." Karen swallowed. "She took my words out of—" "Ms. Karen," Judy's tone cut cleanly through the air, "you lied in your complaint. You lied in this courtroom, and now I have evidence you have involved your child in those lies, repeatedly." Karen's mouth opened, but nothing came out. The audience sat frozen, as if the slightest movement might shatter whatever thin barrier still held this mother and child together. Judy continued calmly, "Your son deserves to grow up understanding the value of honesty. Instead, he has learned to fear your reactions more than he fears doing wrong." The boy's eyes filled again, not with guilt, but with something quieter, sadder. A realization. A release. Karen's voice returned in a hoarse whisper. "I was protecting him. You don't understand how hard it is to be a single mother." Judy didn't budge. "Being a parent is not a free pass to bully strangers or to weaponize your child." Karen's face reddened. "I wasn't—" "Sit," Judy warned again. Karen collapsed back into her chair. Judy opened the last page. "The repair estimate for the phone you refused to pay." She began reading numbers, cold, factual, undeniable. The cost of the screen, the cost of labor, the additional fee for retrieving the customer's data. The notes about the customer's lost work files, priceless really, yet reduced to a dollar amount because that was all the system allowed. Each line struck Karen like another weight on her chest. Each word made the boy shrink further. "This," Judy said, placing the paper down with finality, "is what your actions cost another human being." The victim spoke softly. "I don't want to punish the boy. He already apologized to me. I just want the truth to matter." Judy nodded. "It will." She turned her attention back to Karen, who was visibly unraveling now, mascara streaking down her cheeks, chest rising and falling in shallow, panicked breaths. "Ms. Karen," Judy said, her voice firm, "you created a situation that hurt your son emotionally. You encouraged deceit. You humiliated a stranger, and you attempted to manipulate this court." Karen shook her head violently. "I was doing my best." "No," Judy replied. "You were doing what was easiest." The boy looked at his mother, really looked, and something in his gaze made her flinch harder than any judgment could. Judy lifted her gavel, but instead of bringing it down, she paused. "There is a consequence beyond payment," she said, her tone low and unyielding, "one this court cannot ignore." Karen's breath stalled. The boy's eyes widened with fear and hope, tangled together. Judy leaned forward. "For your son's sake, I am issuing a mandatory order." The courtroom went dead silent. The courtroom felt colder now, not from fear, but from clarity. Truth has a way of stripping everything down to bone. Even the air seemed to brace itself as Judge Judy steadied the final page, her expression unreadable, her eyes sharp enough to slice through pretense. Karen's breath trembled in the silence, the kind of silence that exists only before something irreversible. The boy sat very, very still. His sneaker toes pointed inward, his small hands knotted into the sleeves of his hoodie. He didn't look at the screen anymore. He didn't look at his mother either. His world seemed to have shrunk to the space between his shoes and the courtroom floor. Judy spoke first. "I want this court to understand something," she said, her voice calm but resonant. "Children do not learn respect from being told to lie. They learn it from watching us, the adults, live it." Karen wiped her face roughly. "I love my son," she said, her voice thick. "Everything I do is for him. I didn't want anyone thinking he was a bad kid." Judy nodded slowly. "And yet, in your effort to protect him from judgment, you became the reason he learned to fear the truth." Karen pressed a hand to her chest as though physically struck. The boy shifted in his seat. This time, he lifted his eyes, not in fear, but in question, as if checking whether the world was finally seeing what he had been living. "Ms. Karen," Judy continued, "your son should not feel responsible for your reactions. He should not have to manage your emotions. That is your job." Karen opened her mouth, then closed it again. Her shoulders shook. The performance, the smirks, the attitude, the deflection, was gone. All that remained was a mother realizing how tightly she had been gripping her child without ever noticing the bruises it left. The victim, still standing at the podium, looked between them with a softness that contrasted sharply with the tension in the room. "Ma'am," he said gently, "I don't think you meant to hurt him. But you did. I'm not asking for anything you can't give. I just want him to grow up kind, not scared." The boy's lower lip trembled, not from fear but from relief. Someone finally said it. Judy rested both hands on the bench. "Ms. Karen, when you walked into this courtroom today, you believed your authority was unquestionable. You believed your son would lie for you. You believed disrespect was strength." Karen's eyes flooded again. "But your son," Judy continued softly, "has shown more integrity in the last 5 minutes than you have shown in this entire case." A tear slipped down the boy's cheek. He didn't wipe it away. Judy lifted her gavel, not high but deliberately. "Before I issue my final ruling," she said, "I have one last question, and it is for you, Ms. Karen." Karen froze, breath held. "Do you understand," Judy asked, her voice low and unwavering, "what your son just taught you about respect?" The boy's eyes snapped toward his mother. The entire courtroom leaned in. If you were Karen, hearing your child say he was afraid of disappointing you, what would you do in that moment? For a moment, it felt as if even the cameras dared not blink. Judge Judy's question still hung between mother and son like a bridge neither knew how to cross. Karen's throat bobbed. Her hands trembled in her lap. She opened her mouth, but no sound came out. Not a protest, not an excuse, not the performative outrage she had leaned on all morning. Her voice, once loud enough to command a room, had abandoned her. The boy stared at her with eyes far too old for his age. "Mom," he whispered. That single word cracked something inside her. Her shoulders collapsed inward. She shook her head slowly, as if finally seeing herself through her son's gaze, not as the fierce protector she believed she was, but as the storm he had been forced to weather. Judy softened just slightly. "Ms. Karen," she said, "your son has been carrying a weight he should never have had to carry. You taught him to lie, not because he was bad, but because you were afraid of being seen as wrong." Karen drew a shaky breath. "I thought, if I looked weak, people would walk all over us. I didn't want him to grow up like me." "And yet," Judy replied, "you were teaching him to repeat your worst mistakes." Karen's face crumpled completely. Tears slipped down her cheeks, but the courtroom didn't feel hostile anymore, just heavy, like everyone understood they were witnessing a heart cracking open. Judy turned to the boy. "Stand up for me one more time." He stood, slower this time, but without fear. "You told the truth when it mattered," Judy said, "and because of that you are not in trouble. Do you understand?" He nodded, wiping his cheek. "Yes, ma'am." "Good." She tapped her gavel once gently. "You have nothing to be ashamed of." "Nothing." Karen let out a small sob, not defiant, not mocking, but raw. Judy turned back to her. "Here is my ruling. You, Ms. Karen, will pay the full cost of the phone, court fees, and damages. Additionally, you are ordered to attend a 6-week parenting accountability course. Your son will continue meeting with the school counselor until she determines otherwise." Karen nodded, unable to speak. "This is not punishment," Judy said. "This is an opportunity to change the direction of your home. Your son showed courage today. You owe it to him to do the same." The gavel came down, not with the dramatic crack viewers expected, but with a soft, decisive thud, a sound that felt less like thunder and more like a door closing gently but firmly. The boy stepped back from the podium. He didn't look frightened anymore. He looked relieved, lighter, like someone had finally helped him lift the burden he'd mistaken for duty. Karen reached out hesitantly. This time, he didn't pull away. He didn't collapse into her either. He simply stood there, letting her take his hand, as if on equal ground for the first time. The courtroom watched in stunned silence as the pair walked out, not triumphant, not defeated, but changed. And as the doors closed behind them, the narrator's voice settled softly. In Judge Judy's courtroom, justice doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers, and that whisper can echo for the rest of a child's life.